Welcome back. You're watching Sunday edition here on KTN News. Many thanks for joining us. Let's talk about Jubilee's troubles in Mount Kenya, and especially Mount Kenya East, that is in the county of Meru. And that is where the National Super Alliance took its campaigns the beginning of this week after visiting the 64 Stadium in Eldoret. They went to Meru, where they did speak to very well-attended political rallies. Let's listen in.
In a fresh attempt to grab a share of the vote-rich Mount Kenya region, perceived to be a Jubilee stronghold, the National Super Alliance Brigade took their campaigns to Meru for a day-long charm offensive that saw ODM leader Raila Odinga and Wiper's Kalonzo Musyoka visit Buri, Imenti North, Tigania East and Igembe North constituencies.
Nasema Wakenya wana sababu. Pili, Wakenya wana nia. Tatu, Wakenya wana uwezo ya kupeleka serikali ya Jubilee nyumbani.
Kenya inataka mabadiliko, na kama vile mwimbaji amesema, mabadiliko haya ni kwa wema wako na ni kwa wema wangu, kwa sababu sisi punda tumechoka. Si ni kweli?
Mwenyezi Mungu hawezi kubadilisha hali za watu mpaka mwanzo mubadilishe ile iliyoko katika moyo wenu.
Thank you.
Citing a myriad of unfulfilled promises by the Jubilee regime, the NASA leaders persuaded residents to cast their eyes beyond tribal cocoons, accusing the Jubilee leadership of hoodwinking Miraa farmers, that their market challenges would be adequately addressed.
Task force ya kuangalia masaibu ya wakulima wa miraa. Ripoti hiyo task force tumeona imetoka.
Kama jino inakuuma, dawa yake ni kutoa. Kama uko na deni, dawa yake ni kutoa. Kama uko na bibi mbaya, dawa yake ni kutoa. Na kama uko na serikali mbaya, dawa yake nini?
Meru has in the recent times arguably been the heartbeat of an internal rebellion against the Jubilee party, an onslaught led by Meru Governor Peter Munya, who is marketing his PNU party, despite endorsing President Kenyatta's re-election bid.
Sema Meru ni battleground, lakini siku ya leo ninataka nibadilishe. Nitaanza kusema Meru ni ngome ya NASA.
That is, of course, Murimi Mwangi earlier in the week in the county of Meru, as NASA tried to have a piece of that so-called stronghold of Jubilee. Let's clear this. Is it a stronghold of Jubilee, Meru, from where you sit this month, or is it a battleground county, or what do you think from what has been happening?
From, I mean, till 3 weeks ago, one would have easily said that Meru, the 812,000 votes were in the basket of President Kenyatta, family, key and lock, and he would actually break into a dance and song. But events for the last 3 weeks have suggested otherwise, and especially coming from elected leaders. Number one is Honorable Inturi, who is known to be very rational. And you recall that in the earlier days of this current administration, Linturi actually accused one of the senior ministers in President Kibaki's administration as having engaged in corruption. And at that stage, nobody would have the guts to take on President Kenyatta, and he indicated that Anne Waiguru had been compromised. However, during the last minute, he bolted, and he said that he'd gone for a trip somewhere. He was not able to push it to the natural conclusion. But when now you look at the statements he's been making the last 2 weeks, it makes everybody very worried and nervous, especially for the Jubilee operatives, whether or not they can take the Meru votes for granted anytime. And several reasons can be attributed to this. The Merus, and he can probably confirm, they miss President Kibaki. Because during the time of President Kibaki, one would easily say that his administration was actually being run by people from Meru. There was Muthaura and Mutai Ringo and company. So the leadership in Kenya was top-heavy with Merus, When they look at the political map today, when they look at the senior public appointments, they don't get to see a Meru face. So they are beginning to say that we're in the cold. And the president, during his campaign, when he was running for president, he said, I'm going to maintain the status quo. I'm going to ensure that all the Merus who occupy a leadership position remain there. But now all of them have disappeared into the forest as far as they are concerned. The only person who has a position is Muthaura, who is in Lapset. And Lapset has been faced with a lot of issues. And then, of course, the message that NASA is talking about, that the problems that you're facing here, they're not limited to you. It's every other person in Kenya. When you talk about the Mira and the challenges, you remember at some stage, it said that the Jubilee administration wanted to fix Mr. Munya, that he had gone to Somalia, cut a deal, and that's the reason why stuff was happening. But later on, with the benefit of time, it came out in the open that, in fact, it's the deputy president who was playing some mischief with the hope of making Mr. Munya unpopular in his own county. And the Merus are now saying, if you come here, you give us promises, and you will not deliver on the promises, we are going to have you held into account. That you are not just coming here to treat us as an appendix in the entire mathematics. And I'll not be surprised if in the next few days, the president decides to go and pitch tent in Meru to try and celebrate a new beginning. But now the president's biggest dilemma is, unlike NASA that has got 4 principles who can be spread countrywide to deliver a message, the president has to do it in person. Because it now appears that when he sends the deputy president to any particular place, he's received with a level of antagonism. People are not happy to take his message. So the president outside running the nation, Kenya, he has to create time to go and visit all the people who are kicking a fuss. And even if he goes to the Rift Valley, people are telling President Kenyatta, come in person, come and talk to us. We don't want any political brokers. Right. And that's the challenge President Kenyatta is facing today.
Anderson, what's the reality from the ground? What happened to the, was it 2 billion? For Mira farmers?
1 billion.
1 billion.
1 billion. Thank you, Kijili.
Isn't that something that Jubilee has tried to do?
Let me clarify that Meru is a Jubilee zone until when President Kenyatta lands in Meru. If he doesn't come to Meru, then Meru votes are shifting to NASA. He must come and address the issues that are pertinent and that Meru people feel that he has to address. The task force that was formed to look at the issues of Mira was given 1 billion. We understand 400 million has been used only on boardroom meetings. So we don't know where the 1 billion has gone, and that's what is I don't think is taking advantage of, because the 1 billion has been, people feel that it has been taken over by Rinturi and Kiraitu.
PDMs.
Yes, PDMs, and then that's the money they want to use to campaign for Jubilee, at the expense of the people of Meru. That's where the biggest discontent is. If you look at the NASA meetings at Timau, which is Imenti, and the North Imenti, you not see so many people. Because that is where we perceive that Uhuru Kenyatta has got a lot of support in Imenti. Right. But if you look at the crowds in Igembe, you find that the crowds in Igembe are as big as the ones you saw in Eldoret.
Are these crowds necessarily going to translate into votes?
Yes, those are the people who vote on the ground. And they're the people who feel that we have been marginalized for so long by the Jubilee government. And they are sending a signal to the government that if you don't come and fix our water problems in this region, if you don't fix our Mera problems in this region, if you don't fix our historical injustices that has been done on us in this region, then we are going to vote for an alternative government. That's what they're saying.
All right.
Yes.
Dr. What do you think about the permutations that Anderson has given us? Imenti being the biggest, and Igembe and Tigania being very unraveled by the Jubilee governments, so to speak, and that making it almost giving NASA some kind of leverage inside Mount Kenya East. Is that real?
Yes, that is actually the position. You remember that before even the Jubilee administration, the Kibaki administration had a lot of inroads. In fact, at some point, people used to contemplate and even purport that the late Lucy was a Meru. That is why they are getting a lot of favors and so forth. But that particular area, when you're talking about the Menti area, is the area that Kiraitu Murungi and the Mudhauras come from. And it was really favored even during the Kibaki regime in terms of resources, in terms of infrastructure. Rural electrification began in such areas. Water projects were initiated in those areas. And so that area still has the hangover of Kibaki, and of course it has still pockets of some leaders in the Jubilee administration, that is Mudhaura, and even Kiraitu still has a lot of influence there. But on the other side, the Tigania, the Gembe side, and even Tharaka Nithi feels excluded outside this Jubilee administration. Of course, Kenyans still have a feeling that every area should have at least somebody in cabinet and so forth. We, of course, forget that the cabinet can only now hold up to 22 positions, because even if you go to Nakuru County is also saying we don't have anybody in cabinet. If you go to Nyandarua is also saying we don't have anybody in cabinet. Right. Kiambu, why the president went there, is saying that we don't have anybody substantial.
All right.
Or we don't have any positions in cabinet.
I want us to widen this conversation and go live to the city center where Jesuit Hakijamii Center, presenting that report. But I want to hear your thoughts before I go to that, Jared. What are your thoughts on what's happening in Meru? I know they are very happy thoughts.
Well, definitely. Firstly, what NASA is trying to do is to disabuse the notion that there are areas that are predominantly Jubilee. What we are saying is, when a Luo is sleeping on an empty tummy in Kisumu, another one could be sleeping equally on an empty tummy in Meru. So that the problems that have bedeviled this nation, courtesy of Jubilee administration, percolates the entire country. It is not akin, or it is not exclusive to certain regions alone. It is a nationwide problem. Now, you saw what happened in Eldoret, and the kind of reception that NASA brigades received. And you saw again what happened in Meru. Now, what Meru people are actually doing is that they are sending a message to President Uhuru Kenyatta that yes, we could be having a long history of relations right from before the world was created. When you talk about Merus, Kikuyus, Kambas, and the Embus. So that is what they call Mount Kenya region, essentially. Of course, Kambas are from the eastern, but they call themselves cousins to Kikuyus. But Kambas have already charted their own path, and they're walking separately, parallel to what Jubilee would always want to see. So Merus are also saying that, we are not very different from what Kambas have done. Right. And it reaches a point when you are recognized as a community, because Kambas, when NASA will get to power, then Kambas will definitely get good representation. And Merus are also saying...
All right. Let's leave it there for now. We'll come back to discuss, those issues and the political battles, both in the county of Meru, that is Mount Kenya East, and also generally. And let's listen to what, we'll talk about what are the issues of the election, what some of the things that politicians are saying on the campaign trail as in the run-up to the 2017 August general election. But for now, let's listen into the Jesuit Hakijamii Center report on what is affecting Wanjiku. Let's listen into the director, that is Dr. Elias Mokua.
Asked ourselves, the voters, what do we think about them? You can guess what we think. They are greedy, they are selfish, they are following their own interests, and that kind of responses. And so we look at the two and try to understand what are these two contrasting voices say about what meaning is coming out of those responses. So that's triangulation, when we try to match those different voices from different people, different perspectives. Here's another example where we ask people what they think about, Kenya is a very educated society. Everyone is running out there for masters, for PhD, but do we have jobs for those people? You can see most people think that there are less opportunities, of course, as opposed to those who think we have opportunities, which is good. But is that, once we have that kind of percentage, is that final? That's the question. We ask another question, just on the same question of opportunities in Kenya, but we twist the question, not to trick the respondent, but to get a different perspective. So we say, look, all of us want degrees, all of us want masters, but since there are no jobs, okay, can we start more technical subjects And you can see people say, yeah, I think we need talent schools, we need polytechnics. Now, how do you compare that response with the one we've just seen? And further, we ask the same question, same question. What do you think about our young people? They're industrious, resilient, they're getting degrees, and they have a very hopeful future. Now, if we were to look at the three different questions and the responses to those questions, you can see that it will take us a moment of reflection before we say, here's a conclusion. And that is what I wanted to explain as a method of our analysis, okay? But here are our three main findings that I would like to present to you. First, in relation to election and the electoral process, so far or up to date, one of the major concerns we have is what we call moral apathy. What's moral apathy? Not voter apathy, no, moral apathy. What's moral apathy? It is a situation where we feel helpless. It's a situation where we feel things have reached a point where trying to be of use, trying to be of help really won't make any difference. You look at corruption in the country, you look at some of the challenges we're going through, you say, well, will we ever end corruption? Well, maybe not, okay? So moral apathy creates a very fertile ground for evil to continue nourishing, because then people are not really interested in changing systems or challenging the institutions or challenging the leadership to be better and supportive to society. So here's one question. In the next 14 years, now 14 years from last year is exactly 2030, okay? So 14 means vision 2030, okay? So in the next 14 years, corruption in my country will be very low. There is increased tax collection, for example. Do people agree with this? See, most of them say no. Okay, what is that? A kind of resignation to fate. Fate will take over. You see, this is our projection. This is our understanding that corruption is so entrenched that really there's nothing much we can do, almost. Of course, there are a few people who are very committed. And here are some of the reasons why people think that corruption will not end. So you can see people say the government doesn't have systems in place, there's political interference, but there are also those who think that somehow this can be fought. But most people, as you can see, think that corruption is not going to end anytime soon. And that's a very important question for these elections, as we'll see in a moment. Here is another reason, or another case where we clearly see that we probably have resigned to fate, okay? In spite of media exposure, and we media here understand very well how much energy and time you have put into corruption cases. Now, is this going to help deal with corruption? You can see a good number of people think that, well, it's very important to know about NYS, Eurobond, or whichever case that's there as a corruption case, but look, this is not going to change anytime soon, okay? And here's a very important question. If you know someone in government who is corrupt, will you report that person to the Anti-Corruption Commission? Most of us Kenyans think that, yes, some of us, not really most, some of us will say, we will report. But see, even those who say yes, the difference is not very big, 57 and 42. But even those who say yes, look at the reasons why. Well, I need to get my. Yeah, most of those who say yes, they will definitely say, okay, I will report them, but even if I report them, no action will be taken, okay? So that gives us a sense of moral apathy. You see, I can tell them, those who are interested, yeah, Kenyans, we are very resilient, we want to deal with corruption, but you can see already the responses. Someone says, no, I don't trust the concern concerned authorities. So there's a little bit of moral apathy, if you will. Now, what's the implication of that on the election process we are in? Well, the unfortunate side is that we're most likely to elect corrupt leaders. That's really the unfortunate side. Why? Because it makes no difference. That's why someone will say, I don't see any difference between this regime and another regime. It's a sense of, well, does it matter? Who is better? Yeah, so there's a high likelihood that we're going to elect the very people at the county level, at the national level, at whatever level, who have squandered, plundered our resources because of the attitude we have taken. Now, how do we realize that also? We can give more evidence. We asked respondents, what criteria are you going to use to elect your leaders? As you can see, there isn't one single major response. And as I said, we also do focus groups. We also do expert interviews. And as you can see, fighting corruption is not one of the top ones, for example, as a major concern, or climate change or something like that. Now, here is, unfortunately, the statement. I'm not sure you can read it very well. It's a young person called Mateso who thinks that because of the constitution that emphasizes public participation, he wants the county government to prioritize, give priority to one or two issues and run with them, okay? But when we ask respondents, do you think this young person's aspiration will be achieved? You can see most people think that it's not going to work. He can have his great idea of this election issification, but surely politicians will ignore him. They are not going to take up that idea. Anyway, they are going to do whatever they want. A kind of resigned attitude from active participation. Now, that doesn't mean that active participation is that easy, okay, as we might want to sound. So moral apathy is one of the major concerns that we will be seeing through this election. Number two, finding number two, as I said, there are three. Does this election so far have an agenda? Do we have a specific agenda we're running on? The classical example is like the West, where maybe building a wall to deter people is a big issue. People will vote on that. Or pro-abortion or pro-choice, all those kind of issues that determine Brexit, or maybe other neighboring countries, whatever we have seen there. But does the Kenya campaign to date really have an agenda? Well, so far, as we read in Vision 2030, we're supposed to be issue-based. We're supposed to focus on issues, not personalities, not horse race kind of discourse. But so far, even as voters, we don't seem to have, if you look at the percentages at the end, none is really coming out with 50, 60, or 70, or 80% of a specific issue that we can say, well, politicians, you must address this. If you go to Baringo today, their main issue is security. Now, in Kenya today, we just seem to be totally scattered, and that says something about our systems. Evidence for that, okay, in your opinion, do you think county governments have priorities in their spending of public funds? You can see most of us think that counties have no priorities. The priority is that of the county governor or county bosses. A few, of course, maybe a few counties have priorities, and that's why there are some who agree, but mostly they say no, okay? Look at another example. Give example of a priority that your county should heavily invest in, but is not. Well, if you look at this, there is no one major issue that we can say, here, look at the county, look at the country, here is one major issue, okay, that really scores very high. There's nothing like that. And what does that tell us about our political campaigns as they are? We're not likely to have any one issue that really catches fire across the country. And that's a pity, because then we are almost running like silos, okay? Everyone doing their little thing, okay? Now, here's one big issue. Everyone realizes it's a big issue. The question of our forests, okay? Look at that question. Kenya's forests are at a risk of depletion because of rampant cutting of trees, down of trees. Everyone agrees it's a big issue, but look at the preceding questions we asked, which is a priority. No one says cutting trees is a big issue. What does that mean? That means that actually we will continue to have hunger, water, river sources will continue to dry, we continue to create more climate change unfriendly environment because of cutting down of these trees, and yet we as a country or at counties, no one is really raising this as a big issue, okay? And of course, there are specific reasons. Finally, Vision 2030, from our findings, is very clear that it's still a mirage. We don't have a very clear reasons to think that we are going to achieve the goals stipulated in Vision 2030, of which the electoral process is well pointed out, that we need their flagship projects. There are specific targets that are set in the Vision 2030, but when we look at that and all those questions we asked in 2014, you can see that the answers are very negative. Now, that doesn't mean nothing is happening. Something is happening, but to what extent is that really giving us hope? And we do hope that in these elections that we are into, somehow some of these issues can be picked up and be discussed at greater depth in a more serious manner, more articulated and professionalized manner. Now, all these are examples of failure or challenges in achieving Vision 2030. However, there are good news, at least for the government. The focus on electrification, rural electrification, when you ask people, by 2030, for example, will we have achieved, let me talk about hunger first. Hunger, most people you can see, they have a certain belief that we are not likely to achieve food security. Part of it because of forests, government, there's so many climate change issues, but yet it's one of the even global goals in the SDGs. So that gives us a reason of concern. Okay, health services, good news for the government. If you ask people today in these researches, how do you find the health sector ministry in Kenya? Actually, it's almost 50-50. Most people think that somehow we're not too badly off. Of course, we have the doctors' strike. That's another issue. But generally, there's a kind of positivity in terms of appreciating government support in that. And also, if you see the projection, when you ask them in 2014 what's going to happen, you can see a good number leans towards thinking that there will be better health services provision. So the government can ride on that actually to build more trust. And then the question of electrification, I think this is healthcare, and there are all those reasons there. Electricity. By 2030, in the next 14 years, you can see there is an inclination towards believing that most homes may be connected to electricity, which is really encouraging. So we don't have all gloom and doom. We have some hope. So overall, what are we saying? Overall, we are saying that really we have to deal with moral apathy in this country by really focusing on one or two main issues. We can't have an election that uses so much money in this country, poor country, that really is neither here nor there. Where is our really key focus? Health sector is a big issue. Agriculture, we're talking about joblessness, and yet the budgets, really the way they are read, you don't see a lot of investment in agriculture, where we're likely to have employment, in spite of the declarations, Maputo Declaration, which Kenya is a signatory to, that our GDP, 10% of it should go to agriculture. So what then is this campaign about, you know?
Dr. Elias Mokua, Director at Jesuit Hakijamii Center, just presenting that report following the research on what issues Kenyans are really facing and want addressed as the politicians hit the campaign trail, campaigning for the August 8th, 2017 general election. Of course, we shall be speaking about some of those issues that have been raised by Hakijamii Center there. Let me start with you, Dismas. There has been the issue of corruption that is going to be a major part of this election. Is it?
Well, first of all, it's refreshing to have the Jesuits do this kind of survey, because you can actually place a premium on what they're talking about. And one believes that they are fair and objective, and they have not been influenced by any other person. Now, if it was a lawyer presenting that report, he would have spoken about Chapter 6 and the entire issue of integrity and corruption. And that report paints a very negative picture about the state of the anti-corruption fight in Kenya. Because a number of the people interviewed, they're saying they have no hope that we'll ever fight corruption in Kenya. And I think it goes now to the political narrative beginning to imagine in Kenya that it's now about family and friends. And interestingly enough, he says some respondents were interviewed on the issue of healthcare in Kenya, and it was 50-50. And there's a good opportunity for President Kenyatta now to come out and actually tell the entire nation, Kenya, what his administration has been doing to fight corruption. Because some of the people interviewed have claimed that if somebody is corrupt, they don't care. They'll actually vote for that person. And if somebody has stolen somebody's goat or government resources, it really doesn't matter in some parts of Kenya, and while in other parts of the nation, it's going to be a key factor. So it would be very good for President Kenyatta to actually tell the nation how he's been fighting corruption. Because if he doesn't do that, then we'll go back to our normal voting patterns. Because you recall from 2002, all the election cycle, people have been engaging in a protest vote. So there's a very high chance, and depending on how Jared and company capture these reports and run with this, that this election, part of the key determinants would be corruption, that people would be voting against corruption. But I guess the ball is in Jared's court to see whether they can manipulate that message. But really, at the end of the day, the president has failed in the anti-corruption fight. Because you recall at some stage, he went to the National Assembly with a long list and he presented people who were suspected to have stolen from the public purse. But unfortunately, some of the people who were listed there were long dead. And some of the cases which were presented at the National Assembly, a number of them were really frivolous. Like, for instance, the case of Charity Ngilu. You remember that stage there was the issue of big tracts of land in Karen. And the majority of Kenyans expected somebody was going to be nailed for that. But she was accused for obstruction of justice, some frivolous cases. When you go to the Afia house, there's a scandal there. There are a lot of resources have been lost. There are allegations. Obviously, it's not been confirmed. And eventually, the information coming out is that one of the president's sister is now classified as a marginalized. So these are the issues that the president needs to address and convince people that if my sister got this opportunity, it's not because she is marginalized, but it's because that she's a Kenyan and she's qualified to get this business. But another group of people would say there's no way the president's sister would be marginalized. These contracts are meant for a poor woman in Samburu or from Nyando or from Bungoma. So I think that's a very important thing. Then the second message, if you allow me to clear this, is about employment opportunities. And for the president, it's a contradiction because he's given figures that the economy is growing, and from the central bank, from the research organizations, you're actually told that the economy is growing. And one would expect that when the economy is growing, there's a positive correlation to employment opportunities. But it's a contradiction, because in other parts of the world, even when the economy is growing, say in the banking sector, because of the emergence of technology, a bank which used to have maybe 20 people manning a banking hall, now they probably need 2. So maybe the president needs to come up with a Marshall Plan that will create jobs especially in the labor-intensive sector. And when the deputy president talks about tarmacking 10,000 kilometers, those are the kind of projects where you'd actually see a lot of labor. If you visit a construction site, you'd see so many people working, but you don't get to see that with all these infrastructure projects.
We have seen a number of corruption scandals during the Jubilee administration. We have reported a lot on them here on something we call graft diaries. But Anderson, in Kenya, I don't know if corruption has increased with Jubilee administration or it has remained the same or it has reduced, but has corruption become so institutionalized that maybe Kenyans don't find it like a real issue? Is it going to be one of those issues that will be forming the opinions of Kenyans as they choose their next set of leaders?
Yes, because Kitiri corruption is like it's instilled in many of us in the country. And the government needs to come out with a mechanism to eradicate this vice, because it's a vice that is going to kill our generations. The president has to come out very clearly. And I don't know if he has to come out very clearly again, because now his term is going to an end. It's only 5 months to election. And we have seen a lot of corruption allegations against so many people in government. Waiguru being one of them, Ngiru being another. Those are cabinet secretaries, which up to date we have not seen any action being taken against them. We have also seen, and there's something I'm always keen about on our roads, when police officers are just picking 50 bob on the road, on a broad daylight. And I ask myself, do we have a government? Where the government, because it's the same government that is supporting corruption. Because if these are police officers who are picking 50 shillings on our vehicles on the road, and they're picking them without even fearing, and is on daily basis, then the big fish is also doing the same. What is left for Wanjiku? And I'm talking about this election must be about issues that are affecting Wanjiku.
All right.
And that's what I'm wanting to see.
Does Wanjiku see this?
Wanjiku is helpless. Because Wanjiku is waiting for the government to help him, but the government is not coming out clearly to see that Wanjiku is protected.
All right.
And that's the biggest problem.
Dr. How much damage will this indictment on corruption on the Jubilee administration be for their re-election campaign?
Ben, let me tie that together with what Dr. Mokua, I don't know if he's related to Dismas here, but has been able to present. Actually, eventually there are several issues he brought out. That one, the elections may not likely be issue-based because it is a myriad of mixed feelings across board. And corruption, as much as is a big issue, he's indicated that when it comes to decision-making of the voter, remember the Kenyan voter is what we will call an irrational voter. Why? Is because when you are presented with two people, for instance, one would have some allegations of corruption and the other one is not, but this one comes from your village, it is likely that a Kenyan voter would go with the one from their village. In fact, if you want your phone to be very busy right now, Ben, just appear on the headlines there with a corruption scandal. People, even those who do not call you, will now start calling you and checking how you are doing and assuring you that we are together. But allow me to also highlight a few other issues that he brought out, which will be very, very interesting in these coming elections. One is that there is a component of moral apathy, that Kenyans have gotten to a place where they're saying there is no difference whatsoever. And that is actually manifesting. If there is a research that I've seen results which resonate to my own observations, it is these findings of this research. Because people have gotten to a point where they're saying, if you can't beat them, then join them. That is where the police officers, I think, also find themselves. They say, look, I can only join them. And remember, there is a receiver and there is a giver. So that Matatu person who gives out the handout is also as guilty as the receiver. But also there is this issue of the economic growth and the focus on education, where he brought out that result, which is very, very interesting. That people have been focused on qualitative kind of studies, that people go to study procurement because now there is a demand maybe to get some output which is interesting when they get jobs. There are people who are going for MBA. MBA is over-flooded in this country today, rather than technical courses which can spur economic development. In this country today, we are actually bringing in expatriates to fix our pipeline, to fix our railway issues, because we've not invested in technical courses. And even people who are investing in development today, we're investing in malls, we are investing in buildings, we're investing in supermarkets and so forth. These things do not produce. We have not committed a lot of energy and resources in attracting investment in manufacturing and industrial development. And you realize then that why we don't have employment is because a mall can only employ as much, and it does not have a multiplier effect to the economy. And so that is an issue that is going to come up. Ben, finally, two issues which are very interesting in this finding, that he said that the issues, the country seems to be operating like silos around the counties. But that should not be the case, or actually that is not the case. The only thing is Kenyans are now moving towards what we call the local content, public participation. In Meru previously, you would generalize Tharaka and Imenti and Tigania combined. Right now, you cannot do that. The issues that affect Tigania are not the same issues that affect the Imentis, are not the issues that affect the Tharakas. So you must be able to contextualize, and that is where maybe perhaps those findings are bringing in that kind of result, that every area has very unique issues, and any person who is going to campaign must be able to resonate with the issues that relate to that particular area for them to have an impact in the coming elections. But something else that I would like to demystify, because I have information related to that, is the issue of agriculture. The results indicate, or the comments that are coming there, is that there is no investment, serious focus in investment in terms of agriculture. I think there has been some combined effort both from government and private players. Like there was the AGRAF conference, which I was privileged to attend earlier last year, in which various organizations, including the Rockefeller Foundation, the Gates Foundation, and others, committed immense amount of resources to agriculture in this country and actually Africa at large, up to $300 billion US. It's only that maybe the population has not gotten this information so as to harness correctly.
Ben, let me just buttress the issue of food security. You can have all conversations around food security till the cows come home. But if Kenyans are sleeping on empty stomachs, then all these conferences counts for zero. Because the poor farmer in Kitale would like to sell his maize for a profit. And the poor lady in Samburu would like to afford to buy maize. So even if you have a lot of investments going to food security, if at the end of the day we are not a food surplus nation, it counts for nothing. The other day it was very, very disappointing for Kenyans to see that a desert country, United Arab Emirates, has actually landed in Kenya and they're in State House and they're giving Kenya foreign aid. They're giving Kenyans food. So you begin to wonder what kind of leadership is in this desert country that can actually engage in irrigation and they supply food to a nation called Kenya. I think on that score, I think Jubilee has got its, zero. And there's also the Galana projects. Because at the end of the day, really, the poor Wanjiku doesn't care about the mathematics or the philosophy around food security, whether there are million conferences, the quality of fertilizer. They just want to be able to afford food. They want Kenya to be a food surplus nation.
Okay. Jared, what is your takeout from this? Then we move on to something else.
Well, I think Jesui Haki Center has brought up very important points that will inform the next elections. At a mundane level, firstly, I think he has given a harsh indictment on all politicians across board. He has said those who are in leadership positions are there because of self-aggrandizement, they are there because they are self-centered and are greedy. So each time that they want to address national issues, they first look at their own selfish interest. You saw from what happened in the year 2013, immediately the new National Assembly was sworn in. Their first order of business was to hike their salaries. And they actually had, they staged what I would call a coup to the government. The Salaries and Remuneration Commission for 6 months without receiving what was due to them until that issue was addressed. So I think that has come out quite clearly that the Kenyan populace do not have confidence in the leadership that they have. The second issue, across board. The second issue is about joblessness. I think this is a critical point. We even saw it. Well, Jubilee administration promised 1 million jobs every year. So we had expected that at the end of their term, we were going to have 5 million new recruits in various capacities. Yes, the government is a big employer, But it is incumbent upon the same government to provide an enabling environment for businesses to thrive and hence have many people join the job market. But you know, what this government is doing is the direct opposite. We just came out of a mass voter registration exercise with a huge target of new voters. But one thing that also came up quite clearly is that there are many people above 18 years who do not have ID cards. The reason is very simple. Before you give people a reason to own those IDs, they don't have any reason to go for them. So if those jobs, million jobs, were indeed put in place, and people know that for one to have access to a job, you need an identification card, every Kenyan would have it. Just like what happens in the US. When you get to 16 years, you are eligible to be a driver. And all homes have vehicles, so you have no option but to own a driver's license. So if this government did put a lot of emphasis on the need to provide those jobs, then we would have been in a better position. Finally, it's about this corruption. I think corruption is going to inform who will then become the next president. I know that NASA in the past, you know, through its leadership, Raila Amolo Odinga, has been coming up every day, you know, letting the public know about new corruption scandals within the Jubilee administration. At the moment, they have simmered. Which is the work
of the opposition.
Yeah, which is the work of the opposition.
All right.
Lately, they have simmered. Because again, Kenyans do not have the capacity to sustain a topic for a very long period of time. So we know when this will erupt again and see Jubilee go home.
All right, I want us to move this along to the next level. We've had a number of issues: corruption, unemployment. We've heard about agriculture and whether there's enough investment. That is contentious from what I hear. We've heard all these things, and the president will be making his last State of the Nation address in the next 2 weeks, you know, before his term expires. And we are seeing all kinds of politicians across the political divide on the campaign trail, you know, wooing Kenyans to, you know, support them. Are we hearing these issues that we're hearing from Jesuit? Are we hearing them on the campaign trail? Are these politicians talking about this?
Well, the politicians are talking about two aspects. For the NASA, they're talking about economic mismanagement of the nation, and that would entail corruption. And we are told that up to a third of our budget goes to corruption. So I think NASA has really been working on that message. And as late as yesterday, you saw Musalia Mudavadi in Mombasa speaking about KRA, whether or not there is a good tax utilization and the way we need to manage our economy. So I think for them, they're focused on corruption as a key message. But they've not been able to convince the nation that there will be any difference from Jubilee. Because when you look at a number of court counties, they've been accused of massive corruption. And in as much as Raila Odinga would say he doesn't have the state resources to engage in corruption, but at least we would have seen even some sort of name and shame.
Right.
Because you remember when his county was being accused of corruption in Kisumu, Anyang' Nyong'o and company were sent to go and sort out the issue. But really, still at the end of the day, the buck really stops with President Kenyatta. And then when you talk about development programs, that's the message the president delivered yesterday when he went to Kiambu. He said, give us more time to complete these projects. But now the issue is, and Walter has spoken about it, local content. Are these projects informed by public participation? Are they for the interest of the locals? Because you may sit in Nairobi and you think that folks in Kisii are interested in a primary school, yet what they really want is a road so that they are able to sell milk. There are parts in Kisii today, Ben, and this is very shocking, and I've said this before, that around 10 o'clock, all the dogs from compounds disappear because the milk farmers are going to get a lot of milk and they don't have cooling facilities. They don't have an opportunity to transport the milk to the nearest shopping center. So what happens after milking? They force the cows to take the milk around 10 o'clock. And at that time, you know, they force the dogs. So the dogs are very clever. They know around 10 o'clock they're going to be forced to drink the milk, so they disappear. So all the projects that Jubilee is coming up with, do they consult the people? Do they consult the voters? Or is it vendor-driven and procurement-driven? And I've got the answer. The president himself has indicated that the treasury mandarins in coming up with the budget proposals, it's actually vendor-driven. It's procurement-driven because they're interested in making a bag. Dr. Mukwa has spoken about rural electrification. Is that the best move that you are going to ensure everybody in Kenya has been connected to power? Some people would say that if you can afford to buy paraffin, you can actually afford to buy, I think they referred to as tokens.
Okay.
But is that electricity really supposed to be the end product, or is it supposed to be an economic catalyst? And I think these are some of the issues people will be addressing.
All right, let's talk to one of those people, and that is one of our viewers calling us from here in Nairobi. It's called Latif. If he's still on the line. Latif, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Ben Kitili.
Yes, sir. What is your take on our discussion this morning?
Yeah, actually, I'm happy with the discussion, the way it's progressing.
All right.
And what I just wanted to say is that we are in the election year, 2017.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But we've seen issues with this government. So far, that has been done by this government. We're talking of corruption. We're talking of insecurity in Baringo.
Right.
With drought in parts of Kenya and healthcare issues.
Right.
But my main problem is that I look at this government as a helpless government. The president the other day talked of mnataka nifanye nini. See, that shows that he's helpless, and really there's nothing that can come out good out of it.
Do you think do you think any side of the political divide, whether it's the Jubilee administration or the opposition, are addressing what Wanjiku would want addressed, according to you?
Yes, I think so. I think that the alternative, that is the opposition, maybe can give us a solution to this.
Right?
Yeah, the opposition can give us a solution to this, because the government now is 4 years. This is 4 years down the line, and these have been issues that people have been talking about time and again, and we don't see any improvement so far. So really, we need a change in this regime.
All right, thank you, sir. That is Latif calling us from Nairobi, articulating some of the issues that he thinks should be addressed. Anderson, you are a politician. What are you telling people on the campaign trail?
Ben, let me first of all say that neither the government nor the opposition is addressing the issues of Wanjiku. And in Meru, I've been talking about these issues. And the issues that the government is supposed to be talking about is the issues of, first of all, the basic needs. Because most of the Kenyans, 70% don't afford even the basic needs, as the food, shelter, and clothing. And you can't build a nation and health the nation without the basics. You can not have healthy people without food, because first of all, people must have a balanced diet for them to be able to live healthy and work and produce for the country. So, and this is what I've been talking about. Let the leaders talk about the real issues. Let the leaders tell the people what they are going to do for them, those who have not been elected, and those who are elected, let them put their scorecard very clear, that we have been able to do ABCD, and what the Wanjiku can be able to see, not stories. Because what is happening with so many politicians is that they are giving Kenyan stories, that we'll do this 2030. But the Wanjiku, what Wanjiku wants is, do I have something on the table? Because if Wanjiku has to move on, then in rural areas, then Wanjiku has to have something on the table to eat. He has to have take children to school. He has to live a healthy life. Then if these issues are not addressed, then we are not building a nation.
Do you think that the politics is overshadowing, it's too hot, maybe too exciting, overshadowing the real issues?
That's what I'm talking about. They are overshadowing the real issues, and the government should come out very, very clearly, because the government has a mandate to educate these people about quite a number of things that the people need to hear. But now the government has also ran into politics. Without they have forgotten their role. Even the ministers and the president and everybody is running into politics without addressing the issues that people need to hear.
All right.
Yeah.
Daktari, the government versus the opposition, how have they dealt with these issues in terms of the messaging, in terms of their manifestos, or for the National Super Alliance, that 7-point agenda that I have? How have the two sides dealt with the real issues?
First of all, I don't think that the opposition has been able to bring out the 7-point pillar in a manner that resonates with the issues on the ground. And that has also been the same for government. That sometimes when you sit at the highest echelons in government and you announce that there is 100 billion projects here or a 300 billion railway here, you know, if you do not enable the common mwananchi to link their hunger with that SGR, then you miss the point completely, because you have to make the common mwananchi understand that if this railway line is going to move from Mombasa to Malaba, this is what it is going to mean in relation to your hunger issues on the ground. And so that message has not come out very, very well. And so when somebody hears, some Kenyans hear some of these imaginary figures, they can only think them, they can only picture them, and they're struggling to only get 10 shillings to get a piece of soap, or 10 shillings to move to the clinic and get a syringe so that they get an injection, then it misses the point completely. And so I think there is a mismatch, especially now when you look at the government side first. There is a mismatch between the communication that is coming from the top and what is happening on the ground throughout the country. Now, the opposition has not done it any better. And I'll begin from the county level. If, as a county, you can commit 200 million to a residence of a governor, a county which is struggling to just find its way, a county that is having a harbor that doesn't work, a county, for instance, that has people who are not going to school, then you miss opportunities completely. And that is where the opposition, I've said this repeatedly, should have used the 24 counties that they had been allocated, or they won, in demonstrating their ability to govern the entire country by prioritizing their projects, by enabling public participation in those sub-counties to ensure that whatever item or activity is undertaken is what people want. I've gone to some of these counties and you will be perturbed that you have 4 boreholes within a radius of 300 meters. The MCA comes with a borehole, the MP comes with a borehole, the governor has their borehole, and the sub-county administrator has a borehole, all of them within an area. And these are counties that are also seen to be, or perceived to be, NASA or called strongholds. Now, in coming to the 7 pillars, I've said here before, look at the pillar number 1, which they talked about national reconciliation. And the strategist is here. Perhaps he needs to hire a higher level strategist like myself to inject more strategic thinking in the pillars. Pillar number 1 is national reconciliation. Then pillar number 2, the implementation of TJRC report. These two they are correlated. They are one and the same. So there is no 2 pillars there. Right. If you go to pillar number 6, which talks about economic development, and pillar number 7, which talks about alleviating poverty, they are the same, because when you develop the economy, the poverty goes away. So it means that they are really running around. And then they have a pillar number 4 there, which talks about enhancing devolution. Devolution can only be organically enhanced rather than bringing it out. That does not, when a common mwananchi sits down there, they ask themselves, what do you mean when you say you want to enhance devolution? Do you want to have the governor having more vehicles? Do you want to have them having more houses they are constructing? So that linkage, both sides, has not been able to resonate very well to the people.
On that very political note, do you think, Jared, that the 24 counties that the opposition commands should have done better to demonstrate to Kenyans what they would do if given the instruments of power?
Well, before I get there, firstly, let us all be in agreement that the government has instruments of delivery. The work of the opposition is to do general oversight, but most importantly, the opposition must have a posture of readiness to take over power at any given time, so that whatever happens that is not in tandem with the expectations of the Kenyan people is echoed by, is trumpeted by the opposition. And I think they have worked tremendously well to bring out these issues on the surface.
You know, Jared, some people say it's very easy to criticize. Like it's much easier to look for the weak points and hammer them.
And at the same time, Ben, as he says that, he also needs to appreciate that we have 48 governments. So when he talks about government, let him talk about 48 governments. Yes.
So the question here is about the 24 that that the opposition controls?
Yeah, so firstly, I was talking about the national government. Right. And also tying that to what you have asked is, issues such as health were devolved deep down to the counties. But this is what the government has done. The law is very clear that when a service or a function is devolved down, costs follow the function. And 80% of the budgetary allocation for health ought to have gone to the ground or to the counties so that the government, the national government, which does supervisory role, retains 20%. But this government has done the complete opposite. They have retained 80% up here for supervision, yet they have only taken deep down there 20%. So that therefore becomes number one issue. There are many roads that were also devolved. From Road C, B, and A are under the purview of the national government. From Road B, E, and others fall under the county government. But this is what this government has done. Certain roads that ought to have fallen under Class D to be tackled by the county government have been upgraded to level C so that they have, they reel their ugly heads on them. So that's also another challenge deep down there. Now, you have asked me about the performance of 24 counties under the grasp of CORD coalition, originally CORD, now NASA. I think across board, all these counties have problems. Problems because, of course, this was a new baby. It takes a long time to nurture. And what came out clearly in most of these counties are matters of corruption, where people mismanage funds, squander them for their own selfish gain. And that is not just isolated to CORD counties, but it is also within, Jubilee counties.
All right.
What happens at the county is that for a budget to be passed, then there are the members of county assembly who need to do that. Now, he has mentioned about 200 million that was taken to help build a governor's house. That is such a big amount of money that had to pass through the assembly to be voted. So it also brings the level down to whom do we then vote to go to represent, at the county assembly.
Unfortunately, we have to leave it there, gentlemen, because of time. We have 1 minute. I want, for 30 seconds, starting with you, Jared, just what do you think will be the big issues this coming week from both sides of the political divide?
Well, I think the president is still trying to make forays into his perceived backyards. He's going to put a lot of emphasis on that. I know on the 18th he's visiting my brother in Meru. So all these issues are still going to continue. CORD or NASA will still also be making movements from one area to another, trying to consolidate its base, but at the same time reaching out to other areas that were not under their grasp. And they are doing so well with that.
All right. Trying to make counties like Meru 50-50.
Right. Right. It will actually be 80-20 by the end of the day.
Dr. 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think, and I'm hoping that the health crisis would first of all be dealt with, at least this week. If it goes beyond this, then it will be way too much. Secondly, I'm looking forward to seeing the strategic response by Jubilee, especially in the strongholds that NASA has been able to infiltrate. We are still looking forward to hear something or a response from IEBC, especially coming from NASA, in terms of the queries that were raised.
Right.
I think IEBC did not respond to them adequately as it's supposed to be. And for that matter, therefore, Jubilee need not to appear as if it defends IEBC throughout.
Right.
So that is an issue that I'm looking forward to seeing this week. And of course, we also look forward to seeing NASA dive a little bit deeper again in some of those perceived battlegrounds.
All right. Anderson, what's your outlook?
I'm looking at both the side of the divine to have fresh brand on the advisory law. Because the government and the opposition we are living now on older generation, which has already expired. So I'm looking at them bringing in fresh brand, which has new ideas, because young people now have got very good ideas.
All right.
So I'm looking for them to bring new ideas, and I'm also asking the people to vote for me as the senator.
That's a good
campaign. Very good. This was.
But Ben, for me, I think there's a gentleman by the name Fazul Mohammed. We said to have written a letter to Kalonzo Musyoka, and I think the letter is having unintended consequences. Because for the longest time, Kenyans have been operating under the impression that, in fact, Kalonzo Musyoka is a very poor man. But with that letter now, we understand that he's got a lot of resources in the accounts. And when you speak to people from his base, they're saying, why are you attacking the NASA ticket? I think that letter may serve to make NASA even stronger. And I suspect when people go to church today, that's all they'll be discussing. They'll be discussing NASA and Kalonzo's role in the entire mathematics. And then number two, tomorrow I expect a lot of politics. If the president attends the funeral for Gachagua in Nyeri, again, we expect him to speak to people, probably even in his mother tongue, and consolidate the ground, which is okay because, you know, he'll be addressing a particular base. And then, of course, there is the issue of IBC, as Walter has spoken about it, because IBC really, the ball is in their court. It's not even President Kenyatta or the NASA chaps. Yes. They've got the primary responsibility of ensuring that we have those credible elections. Right. So it would be interesting to find out whether they are going to clean the register so that we have a credible election, so that this gentleman, if he gets a beating, he does not blame IBC for stealing votes.
All right, Ben.
Thank you,
Just 1 minute. 1 second.
Consistent with politicians.
NGO board last year deregistered certain NGOs that were perceived to be involved in financial probity. Kalonzo Musyoka's foundation was not affected. Why now?
Why now? All right. Indeed. Thank you, gentlemen. Those are the big stories. That is the outlook from the experts here with me. Jared Dismas Mokua, political analyst, senatorial aspirant for the county of Meru, Anderson Kadendu there, obviously. Dr. Walter Ongeti, governance and strategy expert. Jared Okello, NASA strategist, will also be gunning for the parliamentary seat of Nyando. Many thanks for joining us, for your time this morning. We have been discussing the big stories here. We have been discussing the issues, Wanjiko's issues, following that report by Jesuit Hakijamii Center here. We've also been discussing what are some of Jubilee's troubles in the county of Meru in Mount Kenya as a region, especially in Mount Kenya East. And that is where we leave it for the program this morning. Be sure to join us every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. to 12 noon here on Kenya's premier and only Sunday morning political show, Sunday edition. I am Ben Kitili. Many thanks for watching. Let's leave you with Siasa Files. Listen in to retired President Daniel Arap Moi.